The mist was heavy that morning, rolling through the alien jungle like a living thing. The air smelled of wet earth and strange flowers, glowing faintly in the low light. Every sound seemed too loud, the rustle of leaves, the drip of water, the distant cry of a hunting beast. Lyra moved quickly through the undergrowth, her breathing sharp and fast. Her slender frame was covered in torn cloth, and her hands clutched a small pouch close to her chest. Inside it was something she could not lose, something worth dying for. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes wide through the mist. She saw shadows moving, 3, no, 4 figures, following her with slow, steady steps. They didn't rush. They didn't have to. They knew the jungle, and they knew she would run right where they wanted. Her bare feet slapped against the damp ground as she pushed forward. Vines tugged at her legs, branches scratched her skin. She forced herself not to look back again. Her people had told her about the jungle trap's old weapons from a war long past. They were invisible until it was too late. She had thought she could avoid them. She had been wrong. Not far behind, another figure moved silently through the mist, human, tall, broad-shouldered. His armor scratched from years of battle. Captain. Reed had been tracking the hunters for hours when he saw Lyra. Something in his gut told him she was in trouble. Now he saw exactly where she was heading, and his blood ran cold. The clearing ahead looked harmless. It was just a patch of open ground, ringed by low bushes, but Reed recognized the faint shimmer in the air. The distortion that meant danger. An energy snare, one wrong step, and the trap would close like a jaw of fire. It would not just capture, it would kill. Stop. Reed's voice tore through the mist, deep and urgent. Lyra froze for a heartbeat, then turned. Her eyes locked on his strange human eyes in a strange human face. But she didn't move fast enough. Her foot brushed the center of the clearing. The air hummed. The shimmer turned into a swirl of blue light. Thin arcs of energy began to rise from the ground. Wrapping around her ankles like glowing chains, she gasped. Trying to step back, Reed didn't think, he just ran. He hit the ground hard, sliding across the wet grass. His armored shoulder slammed into her side, knocking her clear of the trap's heart. For a single second, he thought they might both get out, but then the snare's main charge exploded upward. The blast of energy slammed into Reed's back. It was like being hit by molten steel. Pain shot through him, blinding, burning, tearing. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. He knew if the trap reset while she was still near, she'd be caught again, with sheer will. He forced himself. To push her further away, Lyra landed hard, rolling onto her knees. She stared at him in shock. This strange human who had thrown himself into danger for her. The hunter's shadows in the mist drew closer, their slow footsteps turning into a run. They had seen what happened. They smelled weakness. Move. Reed growled through clenched teeth. He staggered toward her. One hand pressed against the smoking burn marks on his armor. Can you walk? She asked, her voice trembling. Not well, he admitted. But we have to go. They stumbled into the thick undergrowth. The mist closed behind them, hiding the clearing, hiding the trap. But the hunter's calls echoed through the trees. Sharp guttural clicks that promised blood. Lyra kept glancing at him. She didn't understand why a human would do this. Her people and his had never been close. Trust was rare, yet here he was, wounded because of her. She wanted to ask him why, but there was no time. The jungle was alive with movement, and the shadows behind them were not slowing down. They reached a low ridge and slid down into a hollow. The damp earth smelled of moss and decay. Reed leaned against a tree, his breath ragged. Rest here, he said. Though his voice was weak, Lyra crouched beside him, still holding the pouch tightly. She looked at him and whispered, "You didn't have to save me." Reed's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Maybe not," he said. but it was worth it. Somewhere above, the mist shifted. The hunters had found their trail, and the trap they had just escaped was not the last one in this jungle. The air was thick with mist, but now it carried the sharp smell of burned metal. Reed's armor still smoked where the trap's energy had struck him. Every movement sent pain shooting through his back, but he didn't slow. The hunters were. Close to close, Lyra kept glancing over her shoulder as they moved through the twisted vines. She could hear the hunters' claws scraping over the wet stones. The sound of their breathing was heavy and animal-like. They were not just chasing. They were herding. Forcing them toward another trap. Reed knew it too. "I've seen this before," he muttered, his voice rough. "They'll drive us until we have no way out." Lyra tightened her grip on the pouch she carried, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. They pushed through a wall of hanging moss. Stepping into a small hollow, the ground here was littered with strange bones, long, twisted shapes from creatures neither of them could name. Reed scanned the area, his soldier's instincts screaming that something was wrong. "Keep moving," he whispered, but his legs felt heavy. The trap's energy had drained more than his strength. It was eating into him, burning deeper than flesh. Lyra noticed. "You're hurt worse than you say," she said quietly. Reed forced a half smile. "I've been hurt worse." It wasn't true. But he didn't want her to. Panic, a sudden screech, split the mist. One of the hunters burst through the trees, tall, armored in bone plates, with eyes like molten gold. It carried a weapon shaped like a curved blade, fused to a living creature. The thing hissed and spat venom as the hunter pointed it at them. Reed stepped in front of Lyra without thinking. He raised his rifle, but his burned arm trembled. The hunter charged. The ground shook under its weight. The shot Reed fired went wide, striking a tree. The hunter swung its weapon, the living blade snapping toward his head. Reed ducked low, ramming his shoulder into the creature's chest. Pain flared hot and sharp, the burns screaming in protest, but he didn't stop. He drove the hunter back into the mist, forcing it to stumble. Lyra darted forward, grabbing a heavy branch from the ground. She swung with all her strength, smashing it into the hunter's head. The blow made a sickening crack. The creature roared, but staggered back. Reed fired again, this time hitting its shoulder. The alien hissed in pain, then turned and fled into the fog. Silence fell. Only the sound of their breathing filled the space. Reed leaned against a tree, his chest rising and falling hard. "You fight better than you run," he said to Lyra, trying to lighten the moment. She didn't smile. Her gaze was fixed on the glowing burns across his back. "You can't keep doing this," she whispered. "Not for me." Reed shook his head. "It's not just for you." He didn't explain. They didn't have time to rest. The hunters' roar would bring others. Lyra helped Reed walk, her small frame straining under his weight. She guided them along an old animal path, weaving between the massive roots that jutted from the ground as they moved. Reed's mind kept returning to the trap. It wasn't just a random danger in the jungle. It had been placed deliberately, and it was no accident that Lyra had stepped right into it. Someone had planned this. Someone wanted her stopped. The path ended at a cliffside where an ancient stone bridge stretched over a deep chasm. The mist swirled far below, hiding whatever lay at the bottom. "We cross," Lyra said, her voice low. Reed frowned. "It's exposed." "It's faster," she replied. She stepped onto the bridge, the old stone creaking under her weight. Reed followed, every sense alert. Halfway across, the sound came, a distant, rhythmic thump. Drums. The hunters were calling to each other. From the shadows at the far end of the bridge, more shapes appeared, 3 of them, armed and ready, behind. The roar of the first hunter echoed from the jungle. They were trapped. Reed looked at Lyra. Her eyes held fear. But also something else. Determination. He tightened his grip on his rifle. "Stay behind me," he said. The hunters advanced, the bridge trembling under their weight. Reed knew he didn't have enough ammo for all of them, but he stepped forward anyway. The mist curled around them, hiding the edges of the world. The first hunter lunged. Reed fired, the shot ringing out over the chasm. The battle for survival had begun again. The bridge fight had left Reed's breath ragged and his back screaming with pain, but there was no time to think about it. The hunters were still out there, their shadows moving in the mist like ghosts. Lyra pulled at his arm, urging him to follow. They left the bridge behind and entered a darker part of the jungle. Here, the trees were taller, their thick roots twisting like snakes across the ground. Strange insects clicked and hissed in the undergrowth. The air was warmer, heavier, almost choking. It was the perfect place for predators to stalk unseen. Reed stopped for a moment, listening. The jungle was too quiet, even the usual bird calls had vanished. "They're close," he said softly. Lyra's eyes darted around. Her grip on the pouch tightened. She still hadn't told him what was inside. But Reed knew it was important. Important enough for her enemies to kill for it. A sudden rustle came from their left. Reed swung his rifle toward the sound. But it was only a small animal, 6 legs, fur bristling, eyes reflecting the dim light. It hissed at them before disappearing into the roots. Reed lowered his weapon. But the moment of tension didn't fade. He knew the hunters would use distractions like this to keep their prey on edge. They moved on. Deeper into the jungle, the ground here was soft, almost spongy. Each step left a faint mark in the moss. Reed cursed under his breath, easy for the hunters to track. Lyra noticed too, and began stepping on stones and roots instead. Small details could mean the difference between life and death. Minutes passed. Then came the sound Reed had been dreading, the low, steady clicks of hunter speech. It came from behind them and from ahead. The hunters were closing in from both sides. "Run," Reed ordered. They sprinted through the twisting paths. Ducking under hanging vines, the mist blurred the way forward. But Lyra seemed to know the general direction. She leaped over a fallen log, Red close behind. The sound of pursuit grew louder. Heavy footfalls, claws scraping on wood, armor, plates clattering together. A flash of movement in the trees above caught Reed's eye. One of the hunters had taken to the branches. Moving silently overhead, he raised his rifle and fired. The shot hit, and the hunter tumbled down, landing with a thud, but the noise would draw even more. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a narrow path between 2 massive trees. "This way," she said. They squeezed through, the bark scraping Reed's armor. The path opened into a hidden glade. In the center was a pool of still black water. It looked peaceful. But Reed's instincts screamed danger. The surface of the water rippled. Then, slowly, a massive shape rose from beneath, a creature with a shell-like back and a mouth filled with long, needled teeth. Its eyes glowed faintly in the mist. It let out a low growl that vibrated in Reed's chest. Lyra stepped back. "This is their hunting ground," she whispered. Reed didn't need the warning from the shadows at the edge of the glade. 2 hunters appeared, weapons ready. They had driven them straight into the predator's lair. The hunters didn't attack right away. Instead, they spread out, trapping Reed and Lyra between them and the water. Reed's mind raced. If they fought, the noise would bring the rest. If they tried to run, they'd have to pass the hunters. The water beast shifted, moving closer to the edge. Its teeth clicked together like blades. Lyra's breath quickened. She looked at Reed, her eyes saying what her voice didn't. "We won't make it out together." Reed made his choice. He fired a single shot into the ground between them and the beast. The crack of energy made the creature roar in fury. It lunged not at them, but at the nearest hunter. The armored alien barely had time to raise its weapon before the beast's jaws closed around it. The second hunter hissed in alarm and stepped back. "Go!" Reed shouted. They ran, weaving between the roots, the screams of the hunter echoing behind them. The mist swallowed the glade as they fled. But Reed knew this was only a small victory. The others would keep coming. They didn't stop until they reached a hollow beneath the roots of an ancient tree. Reed collapsed against the trunk, trying to steady his breathing. Lyra sat beside him, her hands shaking. "You saved me again," she said. Reed gave a tired smile. That's becoming a bad habit. But his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the mist beyond. The hunt wasn't over. Not yet. The hollow under the giant tree was dark and damp. Roots as thick as a man's arm curled around them like a cage. Outside, the mist swirled in slow, heavy waves. The sound of the jungle was muffled here, as if the world was holding its breath. Reed sat with his back against the trunk, his burns aching. He could still feel the deep throb from where the trap had struck him. Every movement pulled at the damaged flesh, but he ignored it. His eyes stayed fixed on the narrow gap that led into the hollow. Any shadow could mean danger. Lyra knelt a few steps away. Her knees pulled to her chest for the first time since they had met. She looked truly shaken. Her hands clutched the small pouch so tightly that her knuckles were pale. Reed had noticed it before, how she always kept it close. It wasn't just something valuable. It was something worth dying for. Finally, he spoke. "What's inside?" She hesitated, looking down at the pouch as if it might answer for her. "I can't tell you," she said, her voice low. Reed's eyes narrowed. "You can't, or you won't." Her gaze met his, sharp for a moment, then softened. "I'm not sure I can trust you," she admitted. Reed leaned forward, the motion sending a sharp pain through his back. "Trust. I've taken 2 hits for you already," he said, his voice steady but cold. "If I didn't care whether you lived or died, I'd have left you back there in the mist." Lyra's eyes flickered. "Guilt, maybe, or fear. I know," she whispered. "That's why I think maybe I should tell you." She loosened the pouch's drawstring with careful fingers. Inside, Reed saw a small crystal, no bigger than his thumb. It was smooth, glowing faintly with shifting colors that seemed to move inside it. He leaned closer, frowning. "That's a data crystal," he said. "Old tech. Rare. This one," Lyra said, "is the last record of my people's history, laws, and survival codes. If it's destroyed, we lose everything." Reed understood immediately. "That's why they're hunting you," he said. Lyra nodded. "They can't just kill me. They need the crystal destroyed so my colony can't rebuild." Her voice was steady now, but her hands still trembled. "I was supposed to take it to the council's ship at the edge of the jungle," she said. "But they knew my path. They set the traps, sent the hunters." Reed looked away for a moment. The image of the energy snare burned in his mind. They hadn't just been lucky. The enemy had been waiting for her, which meant, "They're tracking you," he said. Lyra's eyes widened. "No, I would have felt they don't have to track you," Reed cut in. "They just need to track the crystal." Silence fell. The weight of his words settled between them. If he was right, then no matter how far they ran, the hunters would always find them. Lyra closed the pouch and tied it tightly again. "Then we need to move faster," she said. Reed gave a short, humorless laugh. "With my back like this." She stared at him for a long moment, then reached into her belt. She pulled out a small vial filled with green liquid. "This will help," she said. Reed eyed it warily. "Alien medicine. It will heal the burns," she said. "But it will hurt a lot." Reed shrugged. "Pain and I are old friends." She poured the liquid onto his burns. The heat was instant. Burning through him like fire in his veins, he clenched his jaw. refusing to cry out. After a minute, the pain began to fade, replaced by a strange coolness. The skin beneath the armor felt tighter, stronger. He moved his shoulders experimentally, still sore but better, before they could say more. A faint sound drifted through the roots, a click, followed by another. The hunters motioned. For silence, they listened. The clicks grew louder, moving past their hiding place. But then, they stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. A shadow fell across the entrance. One of the hunters had found them. It crouched low, its glowing eyes scanning the dark. Reed's hand went to his rifle. Lyra's hand went to the pouch. For a moment, neither moved. Then the hunter hissed, a sound like metal tearing, and lunged forward. Reed fired, the shot blinding in the dark. The hunter's body slammed into the roots, shaking the hollow, but more sounds followed. Too many. Reed grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her to her feet. "They know where we are," he said, and, with the crystal still glowing faintly inside her pouch, they ran deeper into the jungle, not knowing if they were heading toward safety or straight into another trap. The jungle exploded with noise. The hunters' calls echoed from every direction, sharp clicks, low growls, and the heavy thud of armored feet. The mist swirled as shadows closed in. Reed and Lyra ran, pushing through thick vines and over slippery roots. The pouch at Lyra's side seemed heavier now, as if it knew it was the reason for all this. Reed's rifle was hot in his hands, the power cell nearly drained. He counted the remaining shots in his head. Not enough for everyone chasing them. A branch snapped behind them. Reed spun, firing at the movement. One of the hunters dropped. With a hiss, its weapon clattering to the ground. Another shape leaped from the side. Reed turned just in time to block with his rifle, the blow nearly knocking it from his hands. "Go!" He shouted to Lyra, but she didn't run. Instead, she grabbed a heavy stone from the ground and swung it at the attacker's leg. The alien snarled, staggering back. Reed finished it with a close-range shot to the chest. They ran again, but the sound of pursuit didn't fade. If anything, it grew louder. The hunters were pushing them toward something. Reed could feel it, and then they saw it. A massive wall of black stone rising from the jungle floor. Ancient, cracked, covered in vines, an old war fortress. The main gate hung half open. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Reed grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her inside. The air within was cooler, shadows stretching across broken halls and fallen towers. "Why here?" she asked, breathing hard. "Because we can use it," he said. He pointed to the piles of debris and the narrow hallways. "We make them come to us." They moved quickly, blocking paths with broken stone and setting up choke points. Reed found an old wall-mounted weapon, long dead. He stripped it for parts, using them to repair his own rifle's power cell. Every second mattered. The first hunter came through the gate with a roar. Reed fired, dropping it before it took 2 steps. But more followed 3, then 4, moving with the confidence of predators who believed the kill was already theirs. The battle was fast and brutal. In the narrow corridors, the hunters couldn't use their numbers at once. Reed fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Every shot was precise, every movement calculated, but he was still only human. One of the hunters slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. Its blade came down. Reed rolled aside, feeling the edge slice the air where his neck had been. Lyra appeared from behind, swinging a length of rusted chain. It wrapped around the alien's arm, pulling its weapon away. Reed took the opening, driving his knife into the creature's throat. The sound of more footsteps echoed through the fortress. "They're not stopping," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "They won't," Reed replied. "This is survival for them, and for us." They retreated deeper into the fortress. A wide hall opened ahead, its roof broken so that pale light streamed through. The floor was littered with old war debris, shattered armor, broken blades, and the skeletons of soldiers long dead. The hunters poured in from both ends. Reed raised his rifle. Knowing there weren't enough shots left, he glanced at Lyra. Her eyes met his. No words were needed. The fight became chaos. Reed used the debris for cover, firing when he could, striking. With his knife when the enemies closed in, Lyra fought to grabbing fallen weapons, using speed and surprise to land blows before slipping away. But they were tiring. The hunters were not. A sudden strike sent Reed sprawling, his rifle skidding across the stone floor. The hunter loomed over him, weapon raised for the final blow. Then a roar cut through the hall, but it wasn't a hunter. From one of the shadowed doorways, a massive jungle beast charged in. Its shell was scarred, its claws the size of swords. It slammed into the hunter, tossing it aside like a rag. Dull. The hunters hesitated, unsure whether to fight the beast or their prey. Reed didn't hesitate. Move. He shouted. He grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward the far exit while the beast tore into the hunters. The sounds of battle echoed behind them as they ran. They burst out into the sunlight on the far side of the fortress for a moment. They stood still, catching their breath. But the cries of the hunters were already coming again. They're still coming, Lyra said. Reed nodded grimly. Then we keep moving, he said. His voice was steady, but inside he knew this wasn't over. Not until one side was dead. The sun was low, turning the mist into a golden haze. Reed and Lyra moved through the broken ruins behind the fortress. Each step was heavy exhaustion, clung to their bodies like the humid air they had been fighting and running for too long. The hunters' calls still echoed in the distance. Closer now, they were not going to stop. Reed slowed his pace, his eyes scanning the ground. He saw the remains of an old defensive wall, half collapsed. Behind it was a narrow pass between two jagged rock faces. This is it, he said. Lyra frowned. It's a dead end. Exactly, Reed replied. We make our stand here, force them through the choke point. One at a time. Lyra hesitated. You can't fight them all. Not in your condition. Reed gave a small smile. I'm not planning to fight them all. Just enough to make them regret chasing us. They worked quickly. Reed gathered fallen stones and old metal scraps, building a barrier just inside the pass. Lyra helped, her movements quick but silent when the wall was high enough to give. Cover. Reed checked his rifle. The power cell was low. He'd have maybe 6 good shots left. After that, it would be knife and fists. They found old clay jars hidden in the rocks. Inside was a black, tar-like substance. Reed sniffed it, his nose wrinkling. Fuel, he said. They coated parts of the wall with it. One spark at the right moment could turn the narrow pass into a fire trap. The hunters' voices grew louder. Clicking, hissing, the sound of armored feet pounding the ground. Reed and Lyra crouched behind the wall. The air was thick with tension. Every second stretched longer. The first hunter appeared, stepping into the pass with slow confidence. Its armor glistened in the fading light. Reed aimed and fired. The shot punched through the alien's chest, dropping it instantly. The echo of the blast rolled down the pass. Then came the next hunter. And the next. They pushed forward, forcing Reed to fire again and again. Each time he hit, but each time more followed. Lyra ducked low, grabbing a fallen spear and driving it into the leg of one that tried to climb the wall. The alien roared, falling back into its comrades. Reed tossed a stone coated in the black, fuel toward the center of the group, then fired his last shot into it. Flames roared to life. The narrow pass became a wall of fire. The heat hit them instantly. Hunters shrieked as the flames licked at their armor. The smell of burning filled the air for a moment. Reed thought they might have bought themselves real time. But the hunters didn't retreat. They moved through the fire, their armor smoking, their eyes glowing brighter in the haze. Reed dropped his rifle and drew his knife. "This is it," he said quietly. Lyra tightened her grip on the spear. They met the first hunter head-on. The clash was brutal, metal against metal. Teeth bared, the air filled with grunts and the sound of blades striking. Reed fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He ducked a swing, drove his knife into a gap in the alien's armor, and shoved it back. Another hunter slammed into him. Knocking the breath from his lungs, it raised its weapon. But Lyra was there. She rammed her spear into its side. Forcing it away, they fought back to back, each covering the other. The ground grew slick with mud and blood. The hunters kept coming, but their attacks slowed. The narrow pass worked in Reed's favor. Only one or two could reach them at a time. Each time one fell, another hesitated just long enough for Reed to land a killing blow. Finally, the last hunter in sight pulled back. The clicking calls echoed again, but this time they were retreating. The flames still burned in the pass, their smoke curling into the sky. Reed leaned against the wall. Breathing hard, his knife was slick, his arms shaking from the effort. Lyra lowered her spear, her chest rising and falling quickly. "They're gone," she said. "For now," Reed replied. He looked toward the jungle beyond. "They'll come again, and maybe with more." She met his eyes. "Then we'll be ready." But they both knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The crystals still needed to reach the council ship. And the hunters would not stop until it was destroyed. Somewhere in the distance, a deep horn sounded. It wasn't the hunters. It was something else. Reed and Lyra exchanged a glance. Whatever was coming next might be worse. The horn's echo faded into the mist. Reed and Lyra stood in silence. Listening, the jungle was quiet again. But it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that meant something dangerous was moving. Reed's burns throbbed under. His armor, his muscles heavy with exhaustion. He had fought too much, bled too much, but the thought of stopping never crossed his mind. The crystal had to make it out, no matter the cost. Lyra kept glancing toward the narrow pass. "The hunters will come back," she said. Reed nodded. "That's why we leave now." They slipped away from the ruined wall, moving along a hidden path that cut through jagged rocks. Lyra led this time. She seemed to know the way. The mist thinned as they climbed higher through gaps in the trees. Reed caught glimpses of the sky turning deep orange with sunset. Finally, they reached a ridge. Below, in the distance, was a dark shape rising from the jungle canopy. A ship. Its silver hull caught the fading light. Lyra's voice was soft, almost trembling. "That's the council's transport." Reed scanned the area with his visor. No movement around the ship. It looked clear. But he knew better than to trust that. They descended the ridge carefully. Every sound made Reed tense. The crack of a twig, the whisper of leaves halfway down. The quiet broke. A shadow moved across the ground in front of them. Then another. From the mist stepped the hunters. Not many, only 3, but these were different. Their armor was darker, thicker, marked with the scars of many battles. Elite trackers. Lyra froze. Reed stepped in front of her. He raised his rifle, but the power cell was nearly empty. The lead hunter hissed and drew a blade as long as Reed's arm. The others circled, cutting off escape. Reed's mind moved fast. They couldn't outrun them. The ship was too far to reach without a fight. He glanced at Lyra. "When I move, you run," he said. "No." She replied instantly. "Yes," he said firmly. "This is the only way." Before she could argue, Reed charged. He went for the lead hunter first. Slamming his shoulder into its chest, the impact knocked them both back. The hunter swung its blade, catching Reed's side. Pain exploded through him, but he didn't stop. He grabbed the alien's arm and twisted hard. Driving his knife between the armor plates, the other two hunters closed in. Reed kicked the first away and spun. Slashing at the second, they hit him from both sides, their blows heavy and relentless. Reed's armor cracked, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "Run, Lyra," he shouted. She hesitated only a moment before sprinting toward the ship. The pouch bounced against her side, the crystal inside glowing faintly behind her. The sounds of battle echoed steel against steel, Reed's grunts, the hiss of alien voices. She didn't look back until she reached the clearing where the ship waited. The council guards at the ramp saw her and waved her in. She ran up, turning at the top. Her eyes searched the mist for Reed. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a shadow emerged, stumbling forward. It was him. His armor was scorched, his movements slow, but he was still alive. The last hunter burst from the mist behind him. Reed turned, knife flashing, and drove it into the creature's chest. Both of them fell. The hunter didn't rise. Reed did barely, and staggered toward the ramp. Lyra ran to meet him. She grabbed his arm, pulling him inside as the ship's engines roared to life. The hatch sealed shut through the small window. They watched the jungle vanish beneath them. The mist swallowed the ground, hiding the battlefield. Forever in the medbay, Reed sat on the edge of a bed while a medic worked on his wounds. Lyra stood nearby, the pouch still in her hands. She looked at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You didn't have to do this," she said. Quietly, Reed gave a tired smile. "Maybe not," he said, "but some things are worth the pain." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Outside, the stars began to appear. The war wasn't over. The hunters would still be out there. But for now, the mission was done. The crystal was safe, and so was she. When the ship reached orbit, Lyra came to stand beside him. "You could have left me back there," she said. "I could have," he agreed. "Then why didn't you?" Reed leaned back, eyes on the stars. "Because I've seen enough things worth dying for," he said. "And you weren't one of them. You were worth living for." Lyra didn't answer. She just smiled, for the first time since the trap. In the mist, the fear in her eyes was gone. The ship turned toward the distant lights of the council station. The hunters would hunt again one day. But when they did, she knew the human would be ready. And this time, they would face it together.